Welcome to the Hopenning, the place where hope is happening, with your hosts Fran Cadron and Marina Theron-Monnery. For more information about Fran and Marina, or to apply to be a guest on the show, please go to our website www.hopenning.com. The Hopenning is for informal purposes only and is based on the research of your hosts, Fran and Marina. They, as well as their guests, are not responsible for any losses, damages, or liabilities that may arise from this podcast, which is not intended to replace any professional medical advice or care by medical professionals you are currently utilizing. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining my beautiful friend Fran and I on episode 112 of The Hopenning, the place where hope is happening. Fran and I decided to talk today about the power of your mind. Since we are both rapid transformational therapy practitioners, that's something we deal with quite a lot. So, Fran, let's talk. Power of the mind.
We've got this voice in our heads continually running through our head. And it's saying stuff like, I can hear a background noise. I don't know where it's coming from. Or it says, Fran, did you remember to lock your car last night? Or did you remember to shut your phone off? So these voices continually go through our heads, and they're there for reasons, but sometimes they get out of control. And when the voices in our heads start to get out of control, we become neurotic, we become paranoid, we become anxiety ridden, we become hypersensitive to ourselves and to others. And, our whole nervous system can run amok. So these past few weeks, I've had a lot of opportunity to really think about what are the voices in our heads and how can we control them better? So I know you and I have certain techniques that we use, then we use them often. We use routines and habits and certain rituals that help us to have the voices in our heads that work for us rather than against us. So what I'm going to ask you first, Marina, is we had a brief little chat first thing this morning about something that you do to help you with the voices in your heads. What do you do every morning?
I meditate. And you can call it quiet time, you can call it prayer. To me, it's meditation. And in that, it is reimagining my day. What, how can I quiet the voices in my head? I love Michael Singer's book. I have to find it, The Surrender Experiment, where he talks about how he got into meditation. It was just, he felt he was being driven crazy by these constant voices in his head, constant chatter, constant interpretation of things that was not always correct because you start to think with your emotions. And once he started to calm down those voices, things just really worked out very beautifully for him in his life. Not always, but even when the turbulence came, to just keep on being strong in that. So yeah, and I have to agree with you, Fran. The interpretation of events that happen in our lives. And one thing I see so often is people who think that they are not worthy or are constantly worried about what other people would think of them. And that's something that I have to work on myself. And sometimes, in some cases, I still have to do that.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's separate from meditation. I think for myself,
Yeah.
with meditation helps me to control the time between something like the impulse, the something that happens and my impulsive reactivity. So
Mhm.
it lengthens that time to be able to give me a pause moment. And when I'm teaching, if there's a moment where I'm not quite sure or something, some kind of a statement is said, or even with people, right? Any people, any person, a statement is said, and my first response may be to take it personally, to be sensitive, to have a negative response. Meditation helps me create a pause time, which is it's not even conscious. It's not a conscious pause time. It's a unconscious, subconscious pause time, which helps me to stop and get back into the frontal lobe, right? Because when we're triggered, we're triggered. The triggers, you have a great way of showing the brain. If you can just show our viewers again how that works with the brain and what happens when we're triggered. You've got like this thing that you do like this.
Can't
Yeah,
remember that.
you understand the parts of the
Yeah.
brain better than I do. And I know that we have a way of flipping our lid. So the inside of the brain is covered by the cortex. And when
Mhm.
if you were to say something that triggered me personally, probably because of an event in my childhood that I'm hypersensitive to, we would literally this cortex part of the brain flips up and we become in the reptile mode. It's fight, flee, freeze, or fawn. That central part of the brain gets activated, and it's the survival mechanism. Of course, it comes from way, way back, when we needed to do one of those four things in order to survive. But nowadays, not every, very, very few events require that to happen. And so when we get triggered in some way, a different part of our brain gets engaged than our conscious, thinking, thoughtful brain does. And so it's understandable. It's understandable that triggers work that way because it's our child inside of us way back from when we were that small child and we needed to be protected or we needed to protect ourselves in some way. So we can see the child who has the temper tantrum on the floor because they want something and they're not getting it. So they will react. That's a fight mechanism, right? Or if suddenly someone says something to me and I am just so shocked, I leave the room because that's the flee mechanism, because I don't know what else to do. Or sometimes when something is just so shocking that we just freeze and we can't say a thing. Well, this is way beyond that. This is the part of the brain that is the protective part of us that is like, okay, we have to do this in order to survive. And that's really for some people that were raised in dysfunctional homes. We learned that. We learned these protective mechanisms and actually saying, I'm not enough, or I'm not good enough, or I don't belong, are all parts of that survival mechanism that get triggered, right? And in adulthood, our story is different. Our story now as competent, um, educated women that are safe, we're in a different frame, but somehow from the past it still continues to come in, and so we need to have tools. And so it's interesting that you mentioned chatter because I'm reading this book called Chatter, the chatter that goes on in our brains. And we all have it. It doesn't matter how old you are, how educated you are, how sophisticated you are. We all have the chatter in our brains that potentially is there to help us survive, but runs amok. So we talked about meditation. Michael Singer, he wrote The Untethered Soul. He's an incredible author. He also talks about how we need to untether ourselves from our thoughts, untether. And one of the techniques that I use is imagine that I'm removed and there's a piece of glass between myself and whatever is going on that's trying to trigger me. It's like a piece of glass. So I can look through the glass, but I still am behind the glass and I can go, oh, isn't that interesting? or I can look at my own brain and say, wow, Grant, isn't that interesting what you're thinking right now? So one of the techniques actually in this book, this psychologist who wrote the book, Ethan Kross, and he is a PhD psychologist who teaches at the University of Pennsylvania. And he teaches this stuff. He's got his students, he teaches undergrads and grad students about psychology. So he had done research, he and his team, and they're scientists, and they, back in 2010 or around 2008, they did research, some of the first research, scientific research that came out with data on how emotions affect physiology. And up until that point, really science believed that emotional health, mental health was something totally separate from physical health. There were two different things. If you were having cancer or autoimmune or whatever it was that's a physical ailment in your body, it was totally removed from the emotional. Well, he came out with data, he and his team came out with data that proved there is an emotional link. And I'll go into that later. But at that point, he received a death threat because of this data. So a handwritten letter was delivered into his university mailbox, threatening his life and that of his wife and his child. And at that point, he kind of, okay, that's just some kind of a crazy person. But then the chatter started to talk. The chatter started, and he became hyper vigilant. He ultra securityed his house. He went to the police. He thought about hiring a bodyguard for himself and his family, bodyguards outside the house. He even got to the point where one night he was awake at 3 a.m. in the morning, standing in front of his picture window in the living room, holding a baseball bat, convinced someone was going to break into his house and attempt to take the life of his wife and child. So, Marina, he's an educated man. He teaches this, he knows this stuff. And he even reverted back into that neurotic state where the chatter in his mind derailed him to the point that he couldn't sleep at night. He couldn't think. He couldn't take care of his family properly. It was difficult for his wife because she was constantly trying to reassure him that nothing was going to happen. And at that point, something happened. There was a snap. And it's super interesting in the book when he describes it because it's a technique that you and I use in our hypnotherapy. So what he
Sorry,
did,
you broke up. What was that, Fran?
it's a technique that you and I
Yes.
use when we're giving a hypnotherapy session.
Yeah.
And he basically said, Ethan, that's enough. You're going to put the bat down and you're going to go up to bed and go to sleep. And he did. He obeyed the voice in his head. He put the bat down, he shut the lights off, and he went to bed. He said in the book it was the first time he slept peacefully right through the night in years. So he is a man who knew his stuff. He knew psychology, and yet when he took on that authoritative voice and he used it in the third person, his mind, his chatter listened.
Now let's break that down because I pulled up a document here that I always have open now on my computer. I don't even shut it down. It's sitting on my desktop and it's always open. And that is from Marissa Peer. I want to quote her because she trained us. She's our mentor. She says that your mind's job is to make your suggestions real, that your thoughts, good or bad, useful or useless, healthy or unhealthy, hurtful or helpful, your mind's job is to make them real. So now Your job is to have better thoughts because your mind is going to make them real. You must imitate your thoughts. Your mind must imitate your thoughts. So it's crucial to remember that if your mind's job is to make your thoughts real, your job is to choose to think fabulous, better, improved, powerful, and upgraded thoughts so that your brilliant body and mind can make them real. And that is something that I'm so passionate about because we talk about the power of the mind. And just like that author, at some point, took his power back and said, no more. We have that choice. So I see this every day, and I can take examples from my own life. It was interesting because I even thought about something from my childhood this morning during my meditation. And I said, okay, let's reinvent that. It's we talked a lot of times about the mind, the thoughts work like a computer program. Now, if the results of that computer program spits out something that you do not desire, go back and find that fault. And that's what we do so masterfully in rapid transformational therapy. You go back, and in the author's case, is those letters and threats and stuff he received triggered fear, fearful thoughts, negative thoughts, and that triggered emotions in him. Then fear is that emotion, and it triggered behavior in him. And then at some point he said, stop, enough. And that is what we do. We go back, we find out where did that start. I work a lot with women with emotional eating issues. Now, if somebody had, for example, my mom did that. My mom was afraid that I would gain weight when I was a teenager. So she would go to the store and bring a candy bar for everybody in our household. And she told me, no, I cannot give you one because you're getting fat. And immediately I started to eat in secret. And it took me many years to get over that and realize, okay, erase that. And in a very big way, let's forgive that. My mom acted from her fears, but I'm going to change my messaging. I'm perfect. I have exactly the body I'm supposed to have. I'm free. And just changing that messaging and forgiving my mom completely changed my behavior. And thinking, okay, but I am not that child anymore. I don't have to be afraid of food anymore or eating. I can trust my body and I don't have to be deprived. And that changed everything for me. And that's the power of the mind. So there's a difference between the thought and the mind. Everything starts with a thought. Another one of my mentors always said, Mary Morrissey, everything is created twice. First with a thought and then with an action. But in between the thought and the action is the mind. And in the mind are all the emotions. So let's get back to that author. Something happened and his thoughts created an emotion in the mind and then acted on that. And that's the power of the mind. While we are in the middle of the Olympics right now, how strong do you think those athletes have to be? Do you have any idea of the pressure they are under when they are there? How much laser focus do they have to have in the power of their thoughts and their minds to be on top? It is tremendous pressure. I work very closely with one of the athletes that is there at the moment. And to see what is going through every emotion, the pressure is insane. So through the power of your mind, through reining in those thoughts, you can achieve so much. And also, getting back to Michael Singer, I think of the mind of all of us have had pets, especially a dog. Cats is a different breed. But you get a dog, you get them as a puppy, and they have no discipline. And so you bring them home, and let's say, for example, you take them out of the car, and the first thing they do is they run for the first open space, which may be in the busy city I live, the road. So now you have to say, no, 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 come back, come back, come back. We don't do that. And maybe forcefully go get them back. And then over time, you have to teach him, we're not going to go in that direction. That's not safe. Let's go into a better direction where you are safe. And that's our minds. We have to constantly rein in our thoughts so that our thoughts do not create a scenario like the author in this chapter book. What did you say, Ethan, right?
Mhm.
He allowed these thoughts to run away with him and to create fearful scenarios until he stopped. So that is the power of the mind. And we can go on for hours talking about that alone.
Mhm. Yeah. And what stopped him was the authoritative voice. It was the voice that said, Ethan, stop. So it for him, it wasn't enough to say, I am safe. I am not being threatened, because he used those I am words and they didn't work for him in that situation. It wasn't authoritative enough for him to be saying, I am safe, nothing's going to happen, you're I'm going to be fine. When he changed it to the third person, the authoritative voice that said, Ethan, you are safe. Ethan, nothing is happening to you. Ethan, go to bed right now. That's when he obeyed the thought, and he went to bed, which brings us back to when we have, the small child, right? Brings us back to the small child or the puppy that's running in the street. No,
Exactly.
we don't do that. Come
Mhm.
back here. So reining in our own thoughts sometimes takes the voice of authority to do it, to tell ourselves in the third person, Fran, you've done this before, you will do it again, you've done harder things than this, you are fine.
Right. So it's
Which
a great example because it's that having to be firm with that puppy running in the road.
the
You
puppy
cannot say,
running in the
oh,
road.
poor puppy, naughty puppy, bad puppy, come over here. You have to be firm.
Yeah,
You have to sometimes raise your voice and say, my dog's name is Khaleesi. Khaleesi, come over here. And you have to be firm with that. And the reason is not because you want to be mean to them, it's because you want to protect them. And that's exactly what we have to do with our thoughts. So
that's right.
important. We
Right.
are the only animal, the only mammal, or even not even mammal, the only species on this planet who has the power of choice. And we have the choice to change our thoughts.
Mhm.
And once
Yeah.
you change your thoughts, you can change your life. I have Wayne Dyer's book here. Change your thoughts, change your life. It works.
Mhm. Yeah. This author talks about uh, distinct um, three distinct areas where we can start to control our thoughts. It's how we relate to our own thoughts, how we relate to others, and how we relate to the environment. And one of the super interesting things he said is another technique to use is to zoom out, is to say I'm having
Love it.
just an argument with you, and I get really personal. Start taking it personal, and I Marina just doesn't understand me. She didn't live my life, blah blah blah. And so one of the things we also do in rapid transformation therapy is we zoom out. So when we
Mhm.
take our client back to, we call it a scene from their childhood or from their past, we zoom out so that they are no longer a participant in the scene, but they're a viewer of the scene watching themselves within it. So I'm there, but I'm here watching myself. And so that is one of the techniques he also advises us to use, is to zoom out so that we can see the big picture. So we see ourselves as a player in the picture, but we also see Marina and we see external environmental things in Marina's life as well as in our own life. And maybe that once back, or maybe a bigger zoom, helps us to understand not only Marina better, but why I was triggered by whatever it was that was happening in that scene at that point. And so it's quite interesting how RTT, what we do as part of our training and as part of the work that we do, is something that psychologists and very well educated, knowledgeable, research-based psychologists do. It's something that it's proven to work. And I'll go back to what he talked about at the beginning about the death threat and why he got it. So he and his team of researchers did this research, and they took people who had a broken heart. They had been dumped by their significant others, and they were in New York City, right? And so he wanted to get 600 participants, all who had a broken heart, to be research participants. And so he collected all these participants and he put them in a CT scanning machine so that they could actually see brain activity, right? What's going on in the brain. And they had to hold a picture of this person, look at this person who broke their heart while they were getting their brain scan. Okay, and of course, I mean, that part of the brain that's triggered emotionally when they see the picture of the person was just highlighted, right? And so then they pulled them out of the scanner and put them back in. And this time they held a hot cup of coffee against their arm. No picture of the significant other, but a hot cup of coffee against their arm. And the same part of their brain, the same part of their brain was triggering, highlighting, it was proof that emotional pain, it causes physical pain. It was as though the same thing was happening, whether it was an emotional heartache or whether it was that hot coffee triggering the pain center in their brain, it was the same. And so we see this as well all the time. The broken heart, the pain, the physical pain, the how emotions wreak havoc on the body. And when you have that cortisol spike because of an emotional event, that cortisol spike will eventually cause physical ailments. It's proven, it's researched, we've seen it over and over in what we do. And yet the medical model of health still wants to deny that and instead give drugs to medicate instead
To
of
numb, to numb. Yeah.
numb instead of looking at the emotional
Right.
event, which is so sad, right?
That reminds me of the book by Johann Hari, Lost Connections, where they took a group of morbidly obese people and put them on this extremely strict diet, and they lost hundreds of pounds. And then they were very happy they could do it successfully. And they had them at kind of a retreat to do that for a few weeks. And then they sent them home, and all of them gained the weight back. And only after that did they call them back in and started to interview, why did you gain the weight back? Because the reason they ate was never resolved. So there's always a reason. And if you think of rapid transformational therapy, have you ever had a client with a physical ailment? And when you go and regress them, you find out that there is a reason why they have that ailment. Have you ever had that?
Always, just about always.
So I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you remember this, Ron, but when we did our training in RTT, at that point I had tremendous tendonitis in both my arms. And I could hardly move my arms. It was so painful. So during our training in one of our reflective practice sessions, it was, I cannot remember who the therapist was, but I asked to deal with that. And what came out was I was hanging on to a drama and keeping myself involved in a drama and talking about it all the time and getting upset about it every day. And it was not my drama. It had nothing to do with me. I had to let it go. And it's absolutely amazing, Fran, because the tendonitis went away. And think of it, I was holding onto something and I had tendonitis in both my arms and it went away. Isn't
Mhm.
that just absolutely amazing?
Mhm.
Again, the power of the mind.
And
So, yes, I agree.
the power of those words, let it go.
Let it go. Right.
Yeah.
Let it go.
And
And
hanging
so
on.
I'm gonna disclose something even more interesting to you. So in 2 months ago, I had this horrible accident and I broke my elbow, right? And that same drama came back into my life. And it was in my face every day. We were on holiday in Italy and I was consumed by it. I had my phone on and it would ping every few minutes. And I was consumed by it. And guess what? I broke my elbow. I was distracted. I broke my elbow. And it was after that, when I was in hospital in Italy, when my phone kept pinging and it was the same drama, that I had that voice in me that said, enough, enough. It's not relevant. I cannot do anything about it. I'm only getting upset about something that I cannot control. Let it go. And so it's interesting because even though I got rid of the tendonitis by for a period of time letting it go, it's almost sometimes these things will scream louder at you and it became really big. And so I had to let it go. And now I get it. It clicked. I mean, I once heard also Mary Morrissey who said, God would sometimes whisper in your ear to wake up. And if you don't listen, he will hit you with a 2x4. Well, I got hit. I got it. Okay, thank you. So the power of your thoughts. And ever since then, it's like this wall went up around me. It's not my drama. It's not my circus. Stay out of it.
That's fascinating. It's really fascinating. Um, it really gives one food for thought, doesn't it?
Yeah,
It really
yeah.
does. Um, so yeah, so the second part that he talks about in the book is our interactions with others and how we can unconsciously not perpetuate someone else's negative self-talk,
Oh, for sure.
right?
Yeah.
And an example might be for myself, a friend of mine, she's a bit overweight, and she knows it. We know it, like, but she continually creates havoc. There's continual havoc in her life, which causes her to say, I can't do this special food plan right now because this is going on. And then this, then that leaves, and then the next thing comes along, and then the next thing comes along, and the next thing comes along. And truly, they are often big things, but I find myself sympathizing, right? I find myself sympathizing and find myself, well, of course, that must be true in that situation, of course. And I've known her almost 7 years. And for 7 years, there's always been a story going on about why she didn't stick to the food plan or why she didn't go through it. And he talks about how there's a fine line between being empathetic and being an enabler.
Mm,
So
mm,
the best If you have someone in your life and they're not interested in having a therapy session, okay, not everyone is, but if they have these always continual reasons why something is going on in their life, something, we can, the best thing to do for them is to empathize, but still be that voice that they need. Still
Mhm.
be the, you're strong, you can do this, you are brilliant, you can do this. So it's a little bit of both. And I think that what we do in RTT under hypnosis, we do it both as well, because you can't listen to someone's and experience a scene with them without being that empathetic, kind, caring. You have to be. But then what we do so brilliantly is the reframe. So, Marina, can you tell our viewers, our listeners, what happens in the reframe of our TT?
Reframe is probably one of my favorite things. And we have this intake form. In my intake form, I ask specifically, basically, what does your future self without this issue look like? How would it feel? How would you walk? How would you talk? And then I use those words, and a lot of times the words that comes up in the situation. So in the reframe is I'm not that anymore. And I am not, for example, I don't need to, I'm not addicted to the emotion of overeating anymore. Because a lot of time people are not addicted to the food, they're addicted to the emotion. That's not me anymore. I now understand that um, I have choice. I can choose for myself. I love myself enough, whatever it may be. And so making strong, I love to use analogies. Not everybody gets it, but Marissa taught us about you see it running down the drain in the shower.
Yeah.
I would tell them sometimes sweep it up with a dustpan, step on it, make sure it's broken, and now go dump it down the toilet. It's not yours anymore. And now just live as the new you. And it's just powerful because something I use a lot is um, coming back to the action. I became aware of something very intimately, and um, because I have memory loss. In my conscious memory, what I can remember is we were on e-bikes in Tuscany. We were coming back from the town Castellina and Chianti, and we were about 2 kilometers from our hotel. And then I thought Wayne was behind me, and but I woke up 2.5 hours later in a hospital in Siena, and I know nothing of what happened from seeing this little bridge that we 2 days before we walked over that bridge and having the thought, while we're close to the hotel, and the next moment wake up in hospital and not knowing where Wayne is, not knowing what happened, and not a lot of people spoke English, being in absolute panic. However, in that 2.5 hours, I was awake. I was having conversations with Wayne, with the paramedics, with some first responders. I was, I told Wayne that I really wanted to go to sleep. And he said, no, you are going to stay awake. And he kept talking to me. I, however, forgot, I did not have any memory that it was 2024. I thought it was 2023. And so I had no memory that my mom passed away. And I had no memory that we were in Italy. But I was awake. And when I physically awake, on my perspective in hospital, I could remember that it was 2024. I could remember that it was that we were in Italy. I could remember that we were e-bike riding. So I lived 2 people at the same time. I lived in this parallel universe. And if we can create our future self now, let's go back to my story when I had to, I mean, you helped me, Fran, as well. When I had to reframe the story about eating in my life, that's not me anymore. The new me is now the one who can live in the world where I am free. That's not me anymore. I'm not that child anymore. And that's a parallel universe. Can I reimagine my childhood where I was given the choice and I could listen to my body? And I was taught how to listen to my body to say, I don't really feel like eating that chocolate bar right now. Instead of, no, you're not having a chocolate bar because you're getting fat. And immediately an avalanche of negative thoughts. Okay, what about, um, Marina, here's a chocolate bar. I completely trust you that you will only eat it if your body needs it. So it's a completely different message. So I had to reimagine myself like that in forgiveness. Change the messaging, change the programming, change the thoughts, and change your life.
Mhm. Yeah, I I think about that. I think about what if, and forgiveness is such a huge part of that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
When we can zoom out and we can see the big picture, and we we be I think with time, as long as we're very conscious about our thoughts, we can begin the forgiveness process, right? If we catch a negative thought, if you were to think something negative against your mom, or think something negative against your mom, you could automatically catch that thought and say to yourself, Mom was doing the best she could at the time,
yeah, right.
right? That process of forgiveness is so healing. I mean, it will heal that little glitch in the software, right? We go back to the software, to that exact spot about the chocolate bar, and we can heal that little glitch by saying, that is what happened, but mom was doing the best she could. And I
Absolutely.
understand that, right? And
One
there's
of my
something,
go-to exercises of forgiveness is the Ho'oponopono. So how I used it with my mom in this scenario is to imagine that I can speak with her and say, Mom, I'm so sorry that I resented you for so long for depriving me from
mhm,
eating chocolate freely.
mhm, mhm,
And then one of the most important thing is please forgive me for the resentment.
mhm,
Because in the resentment, I hurt myself more than I hurt you. It's interesting because after she passed away, the song by Christina Aguilera, Hurt, came to my mind. And I used to sing that quite a lot. And I recall the words, I'm sorry for blaming you for everything I couldn't do. And that's exactly it. In that Ho'oponopono, I'm so sorry that I blamed you. But in the end, I was just hurting myself more. So in a sense, I forgive myself and I forgive you. And then thank you that you actually, in the best way that you thought you could, try to help me. I love you. How is that for forgiveness?
yeah, that's beautiful.
And I
Beautiful.
apply it to so many things. We live in such a controversial world right now with so many opposing thoughts and beliefs and whatever else goes on. And I'm going to bring up something quite controversial right now. In the opening ceremonies of the Olympics, I didn't watch it. I was away for the weekend, so I didn't watch it. But there was that scene where the Christians believe that it was a kind of a reenactment of the Last Supper. The Olympic Committee said no, it was a reenactment of mythology. And how do we really know? And I haven't seen it. I don't understand French, so I don't know what happened there. But can we all just take a step back?
Yeah,
Because what do I know? What do I know? If I believe social media, I would go on a tangent in one direction or the other.
or a third. It's all a
Yeah,
conspiracy.
it's all a conspiracy. Are we dictated by conspiracies today? Can we be that strong person saying, stop? And I'm just going to rise above it. I'm going to step away. I'm going to go to the bigger picture. Does it matter?
Does it matter? That's
Can
right.
we prove it? Do you know 100% that the intent of this was the one scenario? Are you 100% sure? Do you have proof of it? Have you seen the blueprints of the person who choreographed or designed that, who said, let's reenact it as this, let's mock this thing, or let's reenact it as that, let's mock that thing? Have you seen it? So people are getting upset. And I want to bring love into this. Do we not need love in this world more than anything else?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Can you even bring love into that scenario? Can you bring forgiveness into that scenario?
and is it what we're here for right now is to judge that, or is it to give applause to the athletes who had to work
Yeah,
incredibly hard for 4 years to get where they are?
it's
Like
a distraction.
where should our minds be? Where should our hearts be? Like to give ourselves, let's give ourselves pause and just think, where should our minds be right now? Distracted or with our country, with our athletes, and just applauding for for all the good that comes out of it, right?
I want to
And I think,
bring the whole, sorry, Fran, I feel like I'm interrupting you. Go ahead.
oh, go ahead, finish off your thought.
I want to bring it back to our thoughts and our minds. And um, this is one thing that my mother always said, and I cannot really apply to me, but you hear it a lot. If you cannot say something nice, don't say something at all. And it's to me investigating yourself. If you go off on a tangent and you get angry and you get resentment and you get um, negative feelings from what you believe in the situation, isn't your job to change your thoughts? Isn't your job? Because are those feelings, those negativity, the hatred, the being furious, being enraged, being offended, is it helpful to you or harmful to you?
Yeah, and that goes
And I
right
think
back to what
each
we
one of
said.
us has the obligation to investigate our thoughts and our emotions and then change it. I believe that if we all start to do that, we can live in the most beautiful world.
Exactly. And the last thing he talked about was how we can order our environment to help our mental chatter, to help our thoughts. And so arranging our environment in such a way that it promotes clarity of thinking, that it promotes clear-headedness. And one of the things he said is to go into nature. So he
Mm,
talked about a study that was done in by researchers from the UK that actually took a large group of people and on the streets of New York City. So they took them off the streets, and these, or they could have actually been students. They were students, and you know how students are always willing to make extra money by being part of a research project. So they brought them in, they had them study material. And whatever it was that they had to study, they knew they were going to write a test on it later. So a large group of people. So once they'd studied for a certain amount of time, they separated the group into two parts. One part of the group went on to the streets of New York City and did window shopping and walking on the streets and all of that. The second half of the group went into nature and explored the park and sat in the park and whatever it was in nature. And then they brought the whole group back together to write the test on the material that they had studied in the first place. So, Marina, who do you think did better on the test?
Oh, the one in nature, of course.
Exactly. So, resoundingly, they had
Yeah.
resoundingly done better. So, the ones who had gone into the green space, that actually felt grass on their feet, that looked at leaves, that looked at the brilliance of the beautiful sky and the trees and all of that, did significantly better writing that exam than the people on the New York streets did. And then they looked at this body of evidence to say how important nature is, even if
Mhm.
you are working at your desk and you can look outside and see trees, grass, greenery. You will do significantly better at whatever project you're doing because you can focus more. So, Marina, why do you think it was that the people who went out on the streets in New York City came back in and wrote the test and did not do as well as the people who were in the green space?
I believe everything is energy, Fran, and the ones in nature had a calmness where not surrounded by clutter.
That is it.
Do you remember when we interviewed Dr. Ran Anbar?
Mhm.
And I ended up buying his book after that, and I've learned a lot from him because when working with children, the first thing he does is to ask them, where is your absolute favorite place? And again, the power of the mind is you can close your eyes and just imagine being in that park, even if you are in the middle of New York City. You can also change, but you change your thoughts, you change the energy.
Mhm.
And I use that in hypnosis. In part of the induction, as you know it today, I would ask the client, where is your favorite place? And then we go down the steps. I would say, okay, imagine we're taking 10 steps. And when you get to the bottom of the steps, I take you there. Whether it's the beach, a lot of them say my bed, my bedroom, the bathtub. Doesn't matter. I take them there. Imagine that you're there and you can see how they relax. Power of the mind.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's exactly right. One of the things he said was the there was so much distraction on a New York City street. There was the traffic, there were the horns blowing, people blowing their horns, there were other people on the sidewalk, there was the windows to look in to look at different window shopping stuff. There were the traffic lights, there was so much distraction. So that person's brain got so overworked trying to focus on so many things at once because it was important to that their brain was mentally exhausted by the time they needed to come back and write the test. So and that because of that, their test, they did not do as well as the people that were in nature. So I mean, there's so many physical senses that get involved whenever we're in nature. There's the touch of the grass, the smells outside, the leaves, the trees, the greenery, the flowers, the everything in nature. There's the sounds. You can hear the wind, you can hear the rustling of the leaves, you can feel the sun on your face, and all of those things we do very cleverly when we take a person under hypnosis and we take them to that beautiful spot that they say when we ask, where are you? And they will say, where I'm by a lake and
Mhm.
you can see it. And we take them there. We physically take them there by saying, you can feel the sun on your face. You can feel the grass under your feet. We take them in their mind under hypnosis to this beautiful place where they can relax and they can become just so well rested and relaxed that these powerful things that we're going to talk about and how we reframe whatever it is that they are going through. We reframe it and give and empower them to be able to get through it. They're so much more able to take all that good thing, those good things
Yes.
in, because their mind is not distracted.
Yeah. So what you explain is really that even though some of us cannot literally go walk in nature right now, we can still go there in our minds.
We can go there in our minds. We can
Mm-hmm.
go. We
How
can go in
powerful.
the mind.
Well, Fran, this was a very interesting topic and a very good conversation. So
Yes.
thank you so much for being here, as
And thank
always.
you as well.
And
Exactly.
thank you to all our viewers and listeners for being with us again on this episode 112. And we will see you next time with more hope.
Thanks for being here.